Good afternoon. Absolutely, Stephen. It's a day before the national budget speech by the Finance Minister Inokotongwane, and one of the main issues that is going to be high up on people's minds is the issue of unemployment. We heard from the State of the Nation address how the President actually gave the private sector a lot of leeway when it comes to what he thinks the private sector can do in terms of job creation. Well, I'm not alone here. I'm with Siyabulela from the Assembly of the Unemployed. Siyabulela Sama is a coordinator, and they've been meeting for the past 2 days ahead of the budget speech to actually discuss the problems plaguing the South African economy, particularly when it comes to job creation. You have been meeting for the past 2 days, Siyabulela. Tell us why you think deep budget cuts and are actually a problem that has caused the high unemployment rate that we face today.
Thank you so much, Xolani. So we've been meeting for the past 2 days because really, as over 250 people gathered here at the St. George's Cathedral under the banner of the Cry of the Excluded, organizing over land, healthcare, primary healthcare, and unemployment. Gathered under the banner of the Cry of the Excluded here to actually talk about the deepening crisis and the crisis of austerity. And you know, as the Assembly of the Unemployed, we have been warning that the cuts in government spending, the wage freeze, the employment freeze, will actually lead to greater levels of joblessness, which is what we're now seeing. Over 46.6% South Africans are unemployed. Over 60% of this rate is actually young people who are unemployed. And we have to understand the South African unemployment as highest in the world and amongst emerging economies. So those are the things that we have been warning about, and we've seen that over 2 million workers, even in the past period of the past 2 years, over 2 million workers have lost their jobs. So what does that call for? That calls for a need for a basic income grant, and that's the reason why, one of the reasons why we gathered for the past 2 days, that we talked around the need for a basic income grant of 1,500 and how do we win this struggle. So we've occupied the Treasury's office, we've sent through the call to submit submissions of what should be included into the budget speech. We did that, but there's been no response. So now we're waiting for the minister to announce a BIG of 1,500.
How did you come up to 1,500, and how would South Africa afford such money? Is it for everyone or a certain category of people maybe who are unemployed?
Look, Xolani, there's been now plethora of evidence. I think now over 15 million South Africans every week go to bed hungry. And 10% of this percentage is actually children, young children who go to bed hungry. And that's a call for a crisis, given that we've seen as well what happened in July of next year. And by the way, there's been a survey that came out by Open Dialogue. They've interviewed about 220 young people. They find that young people, through looking for jobs, spend about 1,300 a month. And while you're looking at the price of food, and while you're seeing these high percentages, you're looking at the prices of food, the prices of food continue to increase. So it also, by the way, affects on the people who are working, because they have to spend on the water rates, on the rents. So the money that goes actually into the food, nutrition, and the nutritious basket tends to be low. So we're saying as well that this should not only target the unemployed, but precarious workers as well, because they're very important to target. And in terms of where the money could come from, and I think that's the most obvious one, because there's been plethora of evidence saying that if you tax between 2 to 3% of the rich, 165 billion could be earned per annum. And why is the South African government not doing that? And we have been calling for an introduction of a progressive wealth tax where you tax the rich. And by the way, during the 1980s, we saw how the corporate tax and the tax that is taken away from companies were about 48%. When the South African government and the new South African democracy came in, this was legalized. The taxation for companies was actually 26%. But if you look at what's happening now, companies are paying 11% of this corporate tax. And why is that happening? So we need to also introduce corporate tax, because that's also very, very important to do. And that's where the money could come from to fund a basic income grant. And by the way, to find a reindustrialization where jobs could come.
Before I let you go, you are also of the belief that we should scrap, as South Africa, the reference to the narrow definition of unemployment, which is currently standing at 34.9%, but we should also focus on the 46.6%, the broad definition of unemployment. Quickly, why do you say that?
Well, because it hides away the real crisis and the real situation in South Africa. There's been people who've given up way long ago looking for work because of they've been discouraged. There's no work, and that takes away their struggle and their plight into the system. So they must be included. And by the way, there are also homemakers who, by the way, would get any job if it was available. They would take any job. But there's no job, and those people are not included. So we're saying we must talk to the expanded definition, because it talks to the real crisis of unemployment in South Africa. And tomorrow we hear, we again telling the minister that as the unemployed, as the 46.6 unemployed people in South Africa, we're saying we need a basic income grant, as we have been calling. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Siebulela Mama, the coordinator of the Assembly of the Unemployed, telling us that they will be marching to the steps of Parliament to actually lay their demands about what Finance Minister Kotongwane needs to do about the unemployment crisis in this country.